I ate zero sugar for 30 days, and by day 15, I was sicker, hungrier, and more addicted to sweetness than when I started. When sweetness touches the tongue, it is not a passive event. It is a biological contract. The brain, the pancreas, the gut, they all lean forward together in anticipation of what is coming. Hundreds of thousands of years of evolution taught them that sweetness meant energy, safety, and survival. So they prepare. Insulin stirs, digestive enzymes assemble. The reward system opens wide. The body does not simply taste, it anticipates. And that anticipation is physiological, it is chemical, it is real. When I switched to artificial sweeteners, I delivered the opening word of that contract and then went silent. The sweetness arrived, the energy never did, and the body, confused, primed, awaiting, began to ask louder and louder for what it was promised. But here is what surprised me most. The body does not just go quiet when it is lied to. It gets louder, and that is where things started to unravel. There is a communication highway running between the gut and the brain. The vagus nerve, enteroendocrine cells, a cascade of hormones that tell the brain whether hunger has been resolved. This system evolved to track real nutrients, real calories, real metabolic payoff. When a compound like sucralose triggers sweet receptors in the gut, that system wakes up. It sends a signal forward. It expects a reply from the metabolic side of the conversation. But there is no reply. The caloric payload never arrives. Research into this pathway shows that repeated disruption of this signal loop can lead the brain to distrust its own satiety cues, making a person eat more, not less, in the hours following consumption of artificially sweetened foods. By day 10 of my experiment, I was experiencing a hunger that had no clear object. I was full and empty at the same time. That is not imagination, that is neuroscience. And if the brain is confused, imagine what is happening one floor below, in the gut itself, where trillions of organisms are also listening to every meal you eat. Your gut is not a passive tube. It is an ecosystem, a living, responsive community of microorganisms that has co-evolved with the human body over millennia. These organisms influence insulin sensitivity, inflammatory response, neurotransmitter production, and even mood. They are not bystanders. They are participants. Several well-designed studies have found that common artificial sweeteners, particularly saccharin and sucralose, measurably alter the composition of the gut microbiome. Specific bacterial species that support glucose regulation begin to decline. Others associated with low-grade inflammation begin to take their place. I checked a blood panel mid-experiment. My liver enzyme markers were slightly elevated, subtle, but present. And I had been so focused on reading labels for sugar content that I had never paused to ask what I was feeding the organisms that live inside me, and what they might say in response. So the biology was already shifting beneath the surface. But the part that unsettled me most was not what was happening in my body. It was what was happening in my mind. Around day 15, I noticed something I had not expected and was not prepared for. I was thinking about sweetness more than I ever had when I was actually eating sugar. I was consuming sugar-free products in volumes I never would have consumed their regular equivalents, because the satisfaction threshold kept moving. Each serving arrived with the shape of resolution, but without the substance of it. The brain's reward loop opened, waited, and then asked again. This is the psychological architecture of dependency, and it does not dissolve when you change the molecule. It migrates. The desire for sweetness is not simply a chemical craving. It is a learned behavior, a conditioned response, a story the nervous system has been rehearsing since childhood. And removing sugar while preserving sweetness is like changing the drug but keeping the needle. The neurological habit remains intact. The craving simply finds a new address. Which raises the deepest question of this entire experiment. If substitution does not work, what does? And the answer, I believe, begins not in a product, but in a threshold. The human palate is not fixed. It is plastic, responsive, adaptive, capable of profound recalibration given the right conditions and the right time. Research into taste adaptation shows that consistent reduction of sweet exposure, not replacement but genuine reduction, lowers the brain's reward threshold within 3 to 4 weeks. A strawberry begins to taste extraordinary. A plain carrot acquires complexity. The body starts to hear quieter signals again. But this recalibration cannot occur if the brain is still receiving constant sweet stimulation, even from non-caloric sources. The threshold cannot fall if the signaling pathway remains permanently open. What I needed was not a smarter substitute. What I needed was the willingness to want less, to tolerate the discomfort of a palate being reset, and to sit with the absence of sweetness long enough for the body to stop expecting it as a constant. That is not a product. That is a practice. And it asks something of us that no label can promise, patience with our own biology. So after 30 days, the real experiment was not about sugar-free snacks. It was about what happens when we stop asking the body to believe a comfortable lie and start offering it something honest instead.